As you may have guessed from my channel, I love art journaling and I love art journals, sketchbooks, all the ready-made ones. But I also like to make my own, as I can make them to the size I want, with the papers I want. And that means that sometimes I make ones with Copic binding and watercolour paper. I might make ones with latches and ring binders and all sorts of different papers. Or something really simple like creating my own cover with my watercolour papers and just a couple of book rings. But however you want to make journals, they really are a great way to get started if you don't want to purchase a ready-made journal. So today we're going to look at a really simple journal that I've started to make and make an art journal page. Hi everyone, Jane here. Thank you so much for watching my channel today and welcome to everybody. Now, I made this journal a little while ago. It's a really simple idea in that all I did was I took 2 pieces of mount board. I think it was ages ago I bought a big box of offcuts from a picture framing company, and it was just all the pieces of the mount board they use for doing picture framing, and there was a big selection of different colours and different shapes and sizes, but totally enough to make things like journals with. So all I did was I cut my 2 boards down to the size I wanted. I cut my paper, and this was I think this was the Hanamoule sugarcane paper, which had been in a pad in my cupboard, and I really wasn't using it. For some reason, when I have pads of paper, I just don't tend to use them. I like working in a journal. Even if I'm going to take the pages out, I like the idea of things being kept in a journal so they're all together and I haven't got lots of loose leaves of cardstock or paper. So I cut them down. I think there may even at the end be a couple of pieces of different watercolour, but I don't know, it might not be. And I just wanted to keep it really simple. As you saw in the introduction, I do sometimes do Copic binding with stitching to some of my journals, which I really love. I love the look of it. I like to leave that exposed stitching as well because I think it looks really nice, and they open up really nice and flat. But quite often I also like the idea that I can take a page out of something and work on it separately and then put it back. And that was my idea with this. So all I did was I punched holes with a normal hole punch, a stationary hole punch. And I just had these bookbinding rings and I just put 2 through, and it makes a really simple journal. Just decorated the cover however I wanted, and it's good to go. So if you don't want to buy a pre-made journal, this is such a simple way of doing it. Now I wanted to show today that you don't even need to have mount board. This is an old box, so I'm just using an old box. Obviously this isn't ready to it isn't decorated at the moment, but it doesn't really matter because it's just to hold it together, and I've done exactly the same. I made this one slightly smaller, but I was thinking that rather than just having my watercolour cardstock to work on or mixed media cardstock, plain cardstocks, I have in the past bought quite a lot of pattern paper. Like many other people, I started out when I started in paper crafting roughly 20 something years ago. I started by making cards, and I had a lot of papers that I bought. I don't use those papers at all now. I really truly do not use them. Even if I make a card, I tend to create my own backgrounds. As you've seen from the amount of mediums I have, I love to make my own patterns, my own backgrounds. I don't tend to use pre-made paper. So recently I went through my paper stock. I didn't have tons and tons, to be fair, but I went through what I had. I've put a massive load aside that is going to be going to a local charity shop for them to be able to sell, and I just kept some that I really liked, and put it in a big folder and put it back in my cupboard. And then I realised that I'm still not using that. So I thought, what would be a good way to use this paper where I'm still getting the effect of it, but I'm using it up, because I'm not going to use it for cards. So what I decided to do was to make it into another journal. So this journal is double-sided, very thick paper. I would say leaning towards cardstock, that I love, but that I am just not going to use in any other projects. And you will see a theme through the sorts of paper that I've kept, and a lot of text. I do love text in papers. As you know, I love the ledger journal, and I thought I could go for a similar sort of vibe with the papers that I have kept. So this one is a sort of a ledger style. This is the Stamperia or Stamperia, I never know how to say that. I think it was the Alchemy collection. Lovely script. Some more from the Alchemy collection, musical notes, but these are all actual printed patterned papers, cardstock. No, I just repeat it through, that I have cut into 6x8 inch sheets, and I just measured at 4 inches. You can see where I've measured to do my hole punching, and then I just cut 2 pieces of box up to be my 2 covers. And I will be decorating them probably in a more of a mixed media style. So if you'd like to see a video where I do decorate the covers, let me know in the comments, because in the past I have made really mixed media-y assemblage type videos on canvases and book covers, and they never do very well. They don't do as well as my art journaling videos. So let me know if you'd like to do that, because I can do it as a video if it's something you would like to see. But today I thought I would take the first page of my journal and we'll make something on here. I'll probably do that in a time lapse, but just to give you an idea that you don't have to have specialized papers to do art journaling. I probably won't be doing like really heavy watercoloring on this. I have actually got some watercolour ground, so I could paint these with my clear watercolour ground and use watercolours on them. So actually that might be an idea. No, I won't do that for today. I'll probably use acrylics and things like that on it. But I just wanted to show that you can use what you have to do art journaling. You do not need specialist papers and cardstocks and journals. You can art journal on anything that you already have in your stash. So I thought this would be a nice way to use that. Some of them are plainer, some of them are a lot more decorated. My aim is that I will just be using one side of the paper. I won't be doing the back, but obviously because they're double-sided, you then get a really nice back to the piece of paper as well. So, and like I said, they're quite thick, so I think they'll take a lot. And then when you've got a journal like this, where you've got your bookbinding rings, you can layer up and have a lot more texture and dimension within your pages, because you can, you don't have to have all the pages in there if you don't want to. It's going to lift up, so you're going to get a certain amount, if I show you, you're going to get a certain amount of extra room in there. I'm not going to be precious about it, because it's a bit of cardboard and some papers that were just sitting in my cupboard anyway. So hopefully that will give you an idea of something you could do if you were thinking that you don't know which journal to buy, you didn't know, what type of paper you wanted. You could create your own, and even if it's just, to get started and get an idea whether you even like art journaling, then, it's just a little sort of technique, or not technique, but an idea for you to try. So I'm going to do this first page. So I will be back with you, and I will do a voiceover over the time lapse, and hopefully you enjoy the video. If you give it a thumbs up if you do enjoy it, that would be fabulous, and if you haven't already subscribed, it would be lovely if you could do that too. And I will show you how I'm going to decorate my first page of my new, what could we call it, scrappy journal. no, pattern paper journal I'm going to call this one. So I'll see you in a bit. I started with the very first page that I dedicated to the journal, which is this ledger style piece of paper, and I wanted to just knock back some of that pattern or the sort of the lines in the background. So I'm going with some Americana Decor chalky finish paint. I do believe it's Everlasting and Revive, so it's a white and a sort of very sagey green colour. I will list everything in the description box as always. and I've got this little tiny brayer that I think I got in a box kit somewhere, and I decided to just brayer it on. I then thought I would just use my bowl scraper as well, just to add a bit of texture and a bit of colour onto this page. My aim wasn't to cover the whole of the page up with the paint. I just wanted to sort of dull down the pattern that was there. Next, I'm going in with a stencil and an indigo blue paint. This one is warm tan. So I'm putting down the paint with my brush. Because I've got that paint layer underneath, it enables me to lift paint as long as I'm quite quick, because acrylic paint does tend to dry quite quickly. So I'm using a wet wipe. I had left the wet wipe out a little while just to let it dry a little bit, and I'm just then wiping off the pattern. I wanted to add more layers to this as well, but I'm only adding my layers sort of in certain areas. So this is a stencil from Pretty Gets Gritty with all the numbers on, and I'm using Leather Corset from Indigoblu as well. So I'm just layer upon layer upon layer of the paints, so that I'm just getting that lovely sort of look. So I'm changing my pattern paper to a different pattern paper. Then I decided that I wanted to emphasise those numbers a little bit, so I'm using my Copic Acrea over the top of the numbers and just little lines and little dashes. And I wanted to add a bit of the white back in as well, because sometimes when you add dark colours upon dark colours, it starts to really sort of not dull the paper, but it becomes quite dark looking. And sometimes you just want to add that contrast back in, and that's what I'm doing here with the white pen. I then added on some texture paste. So this is the Pretty Gets Gritty texture paste, and this is through the mesh stencil, which is also from Pretty Gets Gritty. I have a feeling this is no longer available, but like I say, I'll add some links into the description box. None of my links are affiliated, so if you have something similar in your stash, use that, or if you want to check around for something that's similar, then I would recommend you do that as well. So just a little bit texture paste through, and then I wanted to colour it, so I'm adding this spray. It's called Frosted Latte, and it's got mica in it as well, so I wanted to let it run a little bit, but then I also wanted to add a bit of darker colour in certain areas, so I tried doing that by adding extra spray. Eventually I decided I probably needed to add something else. I started off with one of my Neocolor 2s. That wasn't working like I wanted to, it wasn't dark enough. So then I headed for the Scribble stick in Umber, because that was a darker sort of brown colour. And I found that you could do some quite good splatters as well with this, and that was sort of like a happy accident almost. I wasn't intending to splatter, but when a few splatters accidentally went onto the page, I thought, oh, I actually like this effect. And that's the thing with art journaling and art and craft in general, go with the flow. Just if you do something and think, oh, actually I like that, then do it on purpose. It makes it an effect. Wanted even more sort of interest, so I'm adding in this not stencil, it's a stamp from Darkroom Door, and I'm using I think it's the ground espresso archival ink. It's a Tim Holtz Distress Ink colour, but it's in an archival ink form. Now, I've had this stamp and die set for ages. It's a Tim Holtz one. It's these tickets. And again, I will list them in the description box. And I'm just stamping out a few using the same ink that I used in the background. And that's something I often do. If you want your projects to look like they're cohesive, whatever colour you've used stamping in the background, if you use that then on your main focal points, it sort of carries that through and makes it all look like it's one piece all together. So after I'd stamped those out, I got the dies and I die cut the pieces out. The little sort of timetable thing I actually just cut out with my paper trimmer, and just to match them in, I'm using some distress ink, some mini distress ink. So I've got Rusty Hinge, Vintage Photo, and then a little bit of black soot, because I did feel that it needed that darker colour just around the edges to help create a bit of a border on them to lift them a bit. And even when I'd done this, I still felt they needed something else. So I got my Archival ink pad in black. They'd all fallen down just then. And I just went round and just caught the edges. Sometimes that's a really good way. If you don't want to add bulk by mounting something onto black cardstock, if you just get your ink pad, black ink pad, and go around, it gives a nice border without too much bulk. So I collected together a few bits and pieces, including these washi tapes. So most of these I do believe I bought in a local change store, the Range, and they were just a set of vintage style washi tapes. They weren't anything too expensive. Now I just stuck them on. Now normally I would stick them on with some matte medium or some glue. I was just putting them on today, but I'm not sure how long they will stay there. They may come off and I may have to go back in at a later date and stick them on with some glue. I've got a paper doll from Tim Holtz, and I got my little tickets that I had made. And I just felt it needed a little bit of something extra as well, so I've got the black thread. So I'm using my Pin Flare glue gel, which is a really good one. It gives you a really strong stick once it's dried, but it also can give you a little bit of dimension. It works well over texture, and it also that's it really. I thought there was another thing, but I think that was it. So I'm just adding them on with that, and just using the washi tape to make like a little area for my little paper doll to stand. Now I stuck it down as a whole piece, and then I decided that looked wrong, so I tore it in half just so it gave a little bit more of a textured edge. And then I had these little bits left over, so where I had some glue sort of standing coming through, I stuck those little bits on top of those to give a little bit of extra interest in the background, but also then to cover up those bits of glue so they weren't just blobs of glue on my page. I'm going with the Tim Holtz clippings, which are sort of like little extracts from books and things. They're quite interesting, and I just chose the one that said storyteller because I thought he looked like he could be standing there telling people some stories. Then, because I just felt with the black thread, I'd only had that one black element, so I wanted to add something else in, so I just put a little bit of splatter. So here is the finished page. Thank you ever so much for watching today. If you have enjoyed this video, do please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, it would be fab if you could hit that subscribe button and help to promote my channel and follow me on this arty crafty journey. And until the next time, bye bye.